Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. This one I'm joins again. Follow up, further thought, all that joints. So, the first joint, this tres cosas ahora. Gracias. Tres cosas. Número uno. Número uno. Right. We begin with the heavy joint. Numero uno. Numero uno is the Trinity of original sin. So, there is a doctrine within many lineages of Christianity that proclaims a phenomenon referred to as original sin. The actuality, with all due respect, love, and peace, is that Jesus never teaches original sin. Jesus never teaches a doctrine of original sin. Jesus never admonishes the act of sexual intercourse, specifically in marriage. In actuality, Jesus affirms sexual interaction between a husband and wife. Multiple occasions through the gospel. I'll rephrase that in a further clear manner. Jesus affirms sexual intercourse between a man and a woman, between a husband and wife specifically. Jesus affirms sexual intercourse between a husband and wife. Full stop. Jesus makes this affirmation multiple times, multiple occasions, and multiple scenarios, iterations within the Gospels, directly, explicitly, plainly, and clearly. And Jesus never proclaims within the Gospels any doctrine of original sin. So that's first. That's facts. Now, what we can reason about is this thing, this follow-up, which is the doctrine of original sin is a doctrine that is conjured by practitioners of celibacy who wield certain power and influence amongst householders, husbands and wives, fathers and moors, and utilize and reference teachings that Jesus provides to establish this doctrine of original sin as a way of imposing guilt and inescapable and inevitable guilt. And the only way of providing relief from the guilt is by proclaiming Jesus as a Savior, and in addition to that, paying tribute to the practitioners of celibacy who are further distant from that practice of original sin, further pure. And as long as the householders want to have sex, be husband and wife, and even if it's just been over a year or whatever, still it hasn't been as long as the celibate practitioners who've been doing it for decades, and thus there's that hierarchy established accordingly. So now that's what is observed concerning the original or the doctrine of original sin, because Jesus doesn't teach it. St. Paul, it may be further proximate in proclaiming something along those lines. However, even then, it's still significantly interpretive and conjured. So, particularly for as heavily as it's wielded, and in fact, what Jesus does explicitly, directly teach in the Gospels, is not to lord things over people, not to put heavy burdens on people. Jesus admonishes the leadership of his day because he calls the number of admonishments, woe to the Pharisees and Sadducees, woe to Chorazin, and additionally, but specifically here in this context, particularly, there is the reference, Jesus talks about duplicity, hypocrisy, not what goes into a man but out of a man. That refers to food, but particularly the notion of having these man-made rules, washing the outside of the cup when the inside of the cup is full of corruption. And even in that teaching concerning the food, it's not even about food. It's about behavior, and recognizing that it's the behavior that is woeful, and if you want to apply sinful there. And he lists a number of behaviors, including murder, and additionally. So we can look at the 10 mitzvot that Moshe Rabbeinu provides from Mount Sinai, that Jesus also affirms. So violations of those plain and simple things: don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't lie. Those are the things that are that Jesus directly, specifically admonishes. Jesus doesn't say don't have sex. Jesus never says that. Jesus never says that. The closest thing that Jesus says to that is, for those who have ears to hear, it is beneficial. There's benefits within it, but Jesus doesn't say it's an original sin. Don't ever do it. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Everybody, that's the bad news. And when people lead and convert and proselytize and lead people with that, that's not benevolent news. That's bad news. That's burdens, and that's what Jesus says not to do. Jesus didn't go around doing that. Look at the Gospels. Look at the narrative. Look at the sequence. Jesus doesn't start his ministry by saying, "Woe to you, woe to you, woe to you." You're thinking about John the Baptist in that respect. And even John the Baptist doesn't necessarily begin his ministry in that way. We see him introduced in that way because that's the narrative, that's the chronology. But looking at Jesus, Jesus begins by saying, "What would you like me to do? Here's some wine. Here's some healing." That's what Jesus does. Begins with benevolent news, Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, 5 a 7. That's where Jesus begins. Jesus doesn't begin by saying, "Yo, you're all sinners, you're all going to hell, you have to follow da 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 and believe in da 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 or else da 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 da." That's not how Jesus starts. That's facts. So when Christians, blessed love and peace to all Christians, when Christians do that, that's not what Jesus teaches. And that's not what Jesus does. So what would Jesus do? Not that. Now, that being said, the doctrine of original sin, as it is proclaimed, goes all the way to the beginning of Torah, which is the first book of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is also the first book of the Bible, which the whole Torah and the whole Tanakh, many Christians actually very infrequently reference. And it's kind of spotty references here and there when wanting to prove something in favorable of whatever they're proclaiming. That tends to be that's the experience. It's not a matter of having a complete knowledge, and particularly a complete knowledge of what's the priority, because even in the Tanakh and in the Torah, there's levels, and there's certain things that have further weight and priority in additionally. And so it's not just a matter of like picking something out and says this is equal to everything else, and therefore what I'm saying right now that goes back to this is absolutely true, because people can point out a lot of different things, and it's a matter of understanding the context, the meaning, the purpose, the story, the narrative, and further. So all that being said, when kinfolk refer to the narrative of creation, Bereshit, in the beginning, and talking about Adam and Eve partaking of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is specifically commanded not to do, that is what's generally referenced as the original sin. And so there's details with that: the serpent, the conversation between the serpent and Eve, Ahava, the conversation between Eve and Adam, and then Adam eventually partaking of the fruit, blaming his wife for doing it, and then being banished from the garden accordingly. So now that is an actual narrative that is legitimate, but even in that narrative, in Judaism, there is not a doctrine of original sin. So procreation, that's the first mitzvah: be fruitful and multiply. That's the first commandment. before even Moshe Rabbeinu, generations before Moshe Rabbeinu, generations before Avraham Avinu, the first commandment to the primordial man of universe is be fruitful and multiply. Be man and woman together and bring new life, procreate together. That's the first commandment. It's not the original sin, it's the original commandment. So that's facts when we're talking Torah. We can talk from other traditions as well, but that's what's written. So anyways, that's some of the stuff on the notion of original sin. And this, it's not meant to be flippant or disrespectful, but it's facts. And it might seem a little bit irreverent because there's just so much heavy-handedness about original sin, because it's such a premise, such the foundation, the beginning for putting people down and making people obedient. And if people aren't obedient, then just feeling downtrodden and further confused. In addition, that's why you do not lead with bad news. I'm sharing this as a responsa to the messages, to the bad news, and this is actually advocacy on the behalf of those who are downtrodden by the bad news that proselytizers put onto others. And it's not just within Christianity as well, but we're speaking specifically about the Gospels. So, because it's interesting, as a side note, I've read references before, like original sin within Islam, like it's not within the Quran. Through our studies, I hear about it from a number of Muslims with whom I have a fair amount of not scholars or clergy imams or sheikhs or otherwise, but still, like, they wouldn't say this. They're not just like out there kind of like doing their own thing kind of thing. And I've heard it from kinfolk, like, I don't know, that just doesn't sound halal. Anyways, so that's just as a side note, but we're focusing specifically on the Christian theology in this respect concerning original sin. Now there is an element, I mean, there are a lot of things that are admonished, a lot of behavior that is admonished in Torah, in Tanakh, as well as in the Gospels. There's always the propensity, there's always the proximity, there's always the presence of redemption, of teshuvah, of making atonement, and making amends, providing korban, providing an offering, making apology, providing restitution, and additionally, so this notion of like being, just by existing, being inferior, and it's not inferior, but it's sinned, and thus having to continually make amends and just repent, just because for existing, and just continually be subservient and enslaved because of that. Even when that doctrine is communicated in the first person plural, we are all sinners, da 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 da. I mean, it's just a matter of recruiting somebody into that cult of guilt and downtroddenness and the hierarchy that exists within that cult. Because now, once everybody is acknowledged as sinners, well, here are those that have already provided repentance, and so listen to those and pay tribute to those. And additionally, so I'm not gonna say that's game, but I'm trying to be focused and further respectful, and it's already, I know it's already ruffling feathers, but that's what it is. So, and this is not even the point where I'm getting to. So I'm just addressing the notion, the teaching, the experience, the phenomena, the description of original sin. Now, that being said, we're going to talk about the trinity of original sin. So, again, in Torah, in Tanakh, as well as in the Gospels, there's a lot of behavior that is admonished. And we can look at what the consequences are of that behavior. We can look at the flood. There's the consumption of flesh, and that consumption of flesh can be understood in two specific ways. There's a lot of commentary about this, and again, this is coming from Torah. This is briefly after the narrative of creation, a few generations later. But it's just recognized that people get caught up in being buck wild, and we can understand consumption of flesh generally, commonly, as being sexually hedonistic, as well as carnal, consuming, actual consumption of flesh, eating other animals, and additionally, when the actual commandment initially, before be fruitful and multiply, is, well, amidst be fruitful and multiply, is Here's every green fruit, here's every green plant of the earth for food. Veganism, plant-based lifestyle. What? It's not some new hipster type of thing. It's thousands of years old. And it's the actual primordial guidance of harmony and peace in the garden, not to eat other sentient life that is moving about, but to be attuned to the plant life. And when needing some kind of material earthly sustenance, to resort towards the primitive act of consuming the plant life rather than killing other sentience that is very proximate with one's own self, because that is where the nasty stuff comes. So, anyways, there's the consumption of flesh during the generation of Noach, and because of that, there's a flood that annihilates life on earth, everything that has the breath of life. What happens to the sharks and fish, that's another story, and that's relevant, but that's another story. So there are other consequences for the hedonism, for the excessiveness, for the pains and afflictions that people cause against each other and one's own self. So there is an element of legitimacy within the admonishment of hedonistic sex. So there's that. But it's not just limited to the sexual act, and that's where we get into the trinity of original sin. And if and this is somewhat of like a first of all, I guess the disclaimer is to provide that there within our walk of Sangha Yosef, Rastafari, and Asona Ashram, and when I say Rastafari, I'm speaking specifically of Sangha Yosef. There's multiple theologies. There's no absence of any one person who can speak categorically for Rastafari, because that's different than the nature of Rastafari. But I'm specifically speaking of our group, of our house, our collective, our Sangha Yosef within Rastafari. We abstain from trying to think of the right word. We don't believe in original sin. Put it plain and simple, just say that. We abstain from believing in original sin. We believe in discipline. We believe in marriage. We believe in sex only in marriage. We believe in discipline and respect for life, for woman, for man, for all beings. So, as I mentioned before, there is an element of legitimacy within the admonishment of original sin, particularly and specifically when responding to sex outside of marriage and the sexual exploitation, sexual objectification, particularly in the context of sexual exploitation, and other types of pains and afflictions that people impose upon each other in that respect. So there's that. However, again, there's admonishment towards the admonishment, towards the heavy burdens, the excessive, or the condemnations and the excessive burdens that some practitioners put upon other practitioners in the context of original sin, particularly when it's utilized as a premise for recruiting and discouraging people into adhering to another person's doctrine. So that's where we are on that respect. So the whole notion of original sin is it's bad news. It's bad news. It's burdensome. It's not benevolent news. So that's that. That's where we're coming from. So when we talk about this trinity of original sin, it's somewhat, we can call it sarcastic, but that's a little bit inaccurate because it's a little bit further substantive than being sarcastic. It's somewhat ironic, but the point is, if there's any original sin, then there's multiple original sins, and that's the point of this. And to recognize that, in recognizing how many multiple original sins there are, how burdensome that whole concept of original sin is. It's not just applicable to sex; it's applicable to many things. And so it's appropriate to recognize that. So that's the purpose of this doctrine, or this notion of the Trinity, and there is to be honest, that there is somewhat of a I can call it snarky, but there is an intentional and somewhat provocative utilization of what is recognized within Christianity as the Holy Trinity, and applying that to the notion of original sin. Um, and that's rather provocative. It's not meant as disrespect, but at the same time, it is calling certain things out, and it is a proclamation of faith in the oneness of God. Um, so I'm just being candid about that too. Now that being said, this is what we describe as the Trinity of original sin. If there's the recognition of the narrative in the garden that I just described between Adam, Eve, and Elohim, and the serpent being there as well, and it's a primordial story. So there's all different ways of interpreting how to perceive that, how to experience that in an earthly sense. Um, but so if that's original sin is derived in addressing that narrative, again, that's later in that narrative. There are further things that are further substantive and further foundational than that particular narrative. Um, and so uh, the, uh, the emphasis of the doctrine of original sin might point to the command of don't eat from the tree of knowledge, don't eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And so that, since that was the explicit command, and since it was violated, now there's that emphasis and significance there, and that's understandable how that can be interpreted. And then there's the consequence of being expelled from the garden. So, and that notion of being expelled from the garden being interpreted as falling from heaven or falling from grace and otherwise. And so that's a lot of the elements of the doctrine of original sin. So if that's recognized in that respect, then it's also necessary to recognize additional preceding and further foundational doctrines, the violations of which have as much and even further significance than what is conventionally or historically referred to as the original sin. So if that's one original sin, not to have sex at all, and that's, again, it's just it's so not it. Be fruitful and multiply. Okay, all right. So if the doctrine of original sin is the first is one of the original sins, based on that narrative, then we can look at another narrative, which is to eat from the green plants of the earth for nutrition, for nutrients. So a violation of that, eating flesh, killing moving life, sentient life, is a violation of that command that was established before the command concerning the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So, and that is also included within the flood, that wipes out life. So we see the consequences of the violation of that mitzvah, that commandment. So if there's the categorical, absolute condemnation against the act of sex, then there's a equitable, commensurate, absolute condemnation against the consumption of flesh, the literal consumption of flesh. And that's explicitly said, not to eat the blood. That's specifically taught to Noah after the flood, and additionally. So even when the animals are, when the korban is permitted, still the original mitzvah and the ongoing mitzvah, when we look at it and study it carefully enough, and just look at how complicated the laws of kashrut are, and unlike what St. Peter shares, peace and blessings, whereby, oh, it's so complicated, so heavy, don't do it at all, don't have to worry about it, everything's clean. That's not what Jesus says. Jesus says, obey the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu. Follow the rules of kashrut. It's complicated. Or don't have meat. Don't eat animals. That makes it very simple, going back to the plant life. And that's evident, again, when Moshe Rabbeinu with Bnei Israel in Bemidbar, when Moses with the children of Israel in the wilderness have the manna to eat, and continually the children of Israel complain, "Oh, this is boring. This is bland. We want to have the nice food that we had back in Egypt in slavery." Again, so plant-based life. So, anyways, that's the second original sin, uh, abrogating, violating that command to partake of the green herbs of the garden for food. Not doing that, eating something else, that's a violation. It as much and even further than eating from the tree of knowledge. So that's the second one. Now, you already know that. You already know that in your heart. You already know that in your mind. You can avoid that. You can deny that. You can ignore it, but you know it. Um, you know this is the truth, and it may be very difficult, but everybody knows it. Everybody knows it in their heart because that's where we come from. That's where our peace is. We don't go through as much existential angst and conflict from eating plants as we do when eating animals. That's plain facts. It's healthier. Plain facts. You can go talk your pimp game about energy and protein and all this other science stuff. Talk to the horses. Talk to the elephants. Talk to the buffalo, the bison, the bovines, the deer. Come on. Silly business. Anyways, so that's the second. That's the second original sin. Is the consumption of anything beyond the green plants, or at least specific. I'll put the consumption of the flesh of animals, moving sentient life. So that's the second sin, and that's fairly easy to see, recognize. Hard to reconcile, but it's easy to see, easy to recognize. Now the third original sin is all the way at the beginning of life of man. And we're tracing the steps back. So there's the narrative of the eating from the tree of life. And then we go further deep and rooted into the trod and into the roads of creation and mankind, further closer to in the beginning, Bereshit. So then that's where we find the commandment to eat of the green plants, be fruitful and multiply. So first affirmation of, so we could say like not being fruitful and multiplying, not bringing life into this earth is actually an original sin. Not to have children is an original sin. How about that? Serious. But either way, partake of the green plants of the garden for food. And the abrogation of that, the violation of that mitzvah, that commandment, that law, that's the second original sin. And that's before getting to the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And again, another side note, when we talk about the serpent said, "Not going to get killed." That's just a ruse. What actually happened? Did Adam and Eve actually get killed? Die? Yes and no. Did the serpent actually lie? Yes and no. That's where life gets like this, because people get tricked by the truth, and that's what it is. That's part of the knowledge. So, anyways, that was a side note. So the third original sin is actually, or if we're gonna call these things, is actually hedonistic sex, because men and women are permitted and commanded to have sex in marriage and bring forth life. So the original sin is adulterous sex, if we're going to do this original sin thing. Second original sin is eating animals. And the first original sin, the breath of life itself. When man is first created from the breath of Elohim, again, at the very beginning, in the beginning, the breath of life. And how can that be a sin? Because in each of these things, we are taking from the material realm and depriving other life of vitality. And therein is harm. And that harm is a violation. And that's an original sin. Because in order for us to live in this life, in order for us to be in this material realm, the samsara, we are depriving other life of being in the samsara. And that's the nasty business. And that's when we get into like the Buddha realm, of meditation, and like complete absolute withdrawal, and like just being like, yo, I'm gonna stop doing anything until I experience that moksha, that awakening, that enlightenment. Um, so that's the first original sin, is the breath of life itself. Um, and there's little choice in that, little choice. Just like what's proclaimed with the third original sin of sex. Um, Even the second original sin of eating the flesh of life, because it would, and with that second one, to be honest, once we get collectively to a heightened consciousness and honesty, and trod in this earthly realm, we recognize that even eating plants is cannibalistic. It's like, yo, you eat what? You eat plants? Plants are sacred beings. They're like your teachers. Why would you eat your teacher? We already know that. Again, we already know that. But collectively, we're still in that path of returning to that consciousness. So meanwhile, in those steps towards that, we have to let go of eating each other, the dogs and cats and everything else. Oh, why would you eat a dog? Why would you eat a cow? Anyway, oh, come on, cow is a cow, a dog's a dog. See what you're doing? See how you look? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or condescending, but it's just like, it's just so. All right, that's the second joint, and again, it takes steps, because even eating plants, corn is growing right here, and it feels like children, and I'm like, yo, the intention is to eat the ears of these corn, and I don't mean to sound subliminal in terms of the nasty stuff that people do in this society. I'm not that we're none. That's atrocities. But to be honest, like growing a plant right now, and seeing it grow each day, responding to the water, responding to the light, and additionally, that might sound oversensitive or whatever, over personification, but that's, as a 50-year-old bachelor, whatever, 49. That's what it feels like, yo, taking care of the plants. I have these house plants that I rescue from the dumpsters through the years. So there is that connection. I know the sacredness of plants, the secret lives of plants. Shout out to Ghanaian citizen Steve Lind Morris, aka Wanda. Um, so I know the immensity of plants. So when I'm seeing the corn growing right now, on one hand I'm like, yo, that's miraculous, and on the other hand I'm thinking, whoa, the intention here is to grow ears of corn and to eat these ears of corn. So eventually, at some point, collectively, we reach and we return to that level of consciousness where we recognize as cannibalism. But at the moment, we are permitted to partake of that. And why that rather than cannibalism of animals? And I don't say that meat is murder. I'm not saying that, because we have a further responsibility to people closer to our own ilk in kind. So that's a little bit excessive in terms of the rationalizations. But anyways, we do have that. We do have a mindfulness of what's involved. We know the pains and everything else. So those are that's the trinity of original sin, if we talk about original sin. And again, the whole point of that is actually to let go of original sin, to let go of the guilt trips, to let go of the condemnations and the power games, and to focus on healing, to focus on truth, to focus on the inside of the cup, to make it full of peace and sharing and chastity and honesty and sobriety. The Panchasilas, the Buddha, beauty. So that's the point of this joint right here that I just shared. Now the second joint in this soliloquy is so it's about dealing with children, dealing with people, and so one of the insights that is shared with me in recent days and weeks is um, what a sacred trust it is, to provide shelter, to provide guidance to a child, whether it's one's own child, but and also particularly when it's somebody else's child. Somebody says, "Yo, he's got something to share. He's trustworthy. Here's my child. Teach my child something. Share with my child. Help my child. Protect my child." That's a sacred trust, particularly when we know what's going on around ourselves, how people got nice games and manipulate and everything else like that, um, only to commit atrocities. So when people trust, that's a sacred thing. It's a holy thing. And I talked with kinfolk recently about that's one of the things. If there's any fear of anything, that's one of the greatest fears is violating that trust, because it's so sacred, it's so weighty. Um, so that's legitimate. Um, Now we can, many of us can readily recognize that sacred trust and the holiness of that sacred trust when it is with children, young children, infants, toddlers, elementary school, even young youth, and middle youth and old youth, middle-aged youth, whatever. That we can see. Okay, we can see the trust there. Um, Here's the consideration, the insight that is shared. To recognize that each person, each being, each humanoid on this earth today is a child. We can say a child of God, yes. Yet even further close and proximate and earthly, each person, regardless of age, from the elders pushing a century to the youngest and everyone in the middle, each person is a child of our ancestors. And just like a parent sending a child to school and saying, okay, here's my child, teacher, I'm trusting you with my life. This is my life, my child, and I'm going to go do work, and I'm trusting you to teach and care for my child, feed my child, care for my child, and teach my child to walk on this earth. Sacred trust. Here's my trust. That's sacred. And the teacher says, greetings, kinfolk. Thank you for the trust, and I will do my best. I will teach your child. I will feed your child. I will care for your child. I will protect your child. Inshallah. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. Jayom. So, that's the exchange. That's the recognition. That's the relationship. Now, that being said, again, when every person we encounter in life is a child of our ancestors, regardless of what their age is, and it is a vulnerable, needing child, suffering child, a talented, brilliant, genius child, and our ancestors are entrusting us with interacting and sharing what we can at that moment with every person that we interact with each day. It's a sacred trust. Our ancestors are saying, here is our child. We see what you are doing. We see the gifts that you have, the service that you share, the seva, the chesed, the meda. We want our child to learn from you in this brief moment that you have with our child. We also know that you are powerful, and you also have imperfections like everyone else. And we know the weight of your words. We know the weight of your guidance. And we know that even in that brief window, a word, one way or another, can send our child in a number of different directions. And so we solicit you to teach our child well, to care for our child, to protect our child, to feed our child. to the best of your ability. Every interaction that we have in life is that sacred trust. That's weighty, that's heavy, that's real. It can be too much, but that's the nature. That's all sacred. So we do our best. Each of us does our best. Patience, patience, patience. But that's a reminder to help us, encourage us to have that patience. And regardless of what the child is doing, that child might be having a bad day. Cantankerous. Patience. What's going on? How are we feeling today? Do we need some food? What's going on? Who did that? Who hurt? Can we talk about this? Again, easier said than done. But again, it's a reminder to help us do it. At least help us do it better. So that's the second joint. Recognizing that each person is a child of our ancestors, and our ancestors are entrusting us in the brief window that we have with each child that we encounter, whatever the age is. Our ancestors are entrusting us with teaching and sharing and feeding and helping that child, and vice versa. So that's the nature. And that's the second joint. The third joint. We got to remember now what we're talking about. Ding 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 ding. Third joint. What we see. That's completely simple. Okay, yes. This is nice, actually. The third joint is actually a nice segue into this joint. The third joint is this. When we do encounter our kinfolk in our trod in each day, here's something to think about. Here's something to remember. Here's something to meditate with. It is that when we have sufficient patience, when we have proper patience, we can find the nicest way, the kindest way, the most honest way of revealing the contradictions within those who are imposing stress, anxiety, falsehood, subordination, injustice, and otherwise. When we have proper patience, we don't even have to say, oh, that's wrong, da 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 da. We can present the circumstances in a way that the other person just recognizes, yo, wait a minute. Yeah, that was trippy. Wait, hold up. What was I doing? Wow. That was just my bad. Now, that might seem bonkers from Yonkers, zonkers. It's facts though. When we have enough patience, some days it's easier than other days, but what it is just a matter of like whatever we're recognizing. First, we gotta cultivate truth and honesty within ourselves, and fairness and justice within ourselves, thoroughly, so that whenever we experience injustice, it is genuinely like, no, that's not right. And when we do that, even then, the nature of being just, the nature of being honest, is being extremely vulnerable. We don't have protections. We don't have weapons or whatever else. It's a very humble. It's this piety, very vulnerable. But when there is a violation, then there's legitimacy in saying, wait, hold on, no, this isn't right, because like I'm already so low already. Ain't no need to be stepping on me further. But when we do that, when we cultivate that within ourselves, legitimately, thoroughly, regularly, it's unnecessary, let me tell it, to wail back, to say, no, blah, blah, blah. Because first of all, we're already vulnerable. It's not, the pious man don't have the muscle to be like, blah, blah. That's not how it works. It's a matter of like, that's inadvisable. Um, and then lightning might strike. And it's not a matter of the pious man saying, may lightning strike. It's just a matter of like, these are the natures. Like, it's inadvisable because there are circumstances. Like, there's a pitfall right there. You might want to be careful. Like, you keep on stomping around me, but I'm letting you know. Da 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 da. So that's part of the nature. So that's a little bit heavy-handed in those metaphors and parables. But the point is that when we have the patience, we don't hit back. We don't try to get back at kinfolk or whatever else. We present the circumstances, and like we can do like the reversal of roles or whatever. But or I mean, there's a number of different techniques, and again, some of it is further accessible, some of it is further like ready made or ready available for that situation. Some of it is extremely different. Some of it is extremely difficult, and we might not have the energy to do that at that moment. So like I said, it's easier said than done, but it's there. It's there when we have the patience. um, so but again, there's a number of different techniques. We can do the role reversal. So how would you like that if somebody did that? Now some people might receive that as a threat, like the same exact thing they just did. If we said, well, what if somebody did that to you? They're like, oh, are you threatening me? Well, you just did that to me, so what are you talking about? That's a little bit like first first level. Next level is like saying something um, like again, it's just a matter of being honest. Like, well, what do you want to do with that? Like, you trying to like grab my backpack? What do you want to do with that? What you need? Oh, you trying to like, well, what do you think you can get with that? What do you think you can get for this? $5, $20? What do you want to do with that $20? You wanna like get some Black and Miles? What you want to smoke the Black and Miles for? Like, is it gonna be gone for? I mean, that's a little bit like tenuous, but it's like just like going through like rationalization. Like, what's going on with this? What's can we can find a solution? You don't need to be like, because I'm working with this, and like it's much further valuable than $20 with the service I'm providing. So it's not even about me, but like other cats are gonna be upset for being deprived of the services that are being provided through this joint. So that's again and again, it's not even a matter of being territorial. It's not even a matter of being even attached or conflictory about possessions. But it just might, like, this is a violation. So wait, hold up, what's going on? That's one thing. Another thing is posing questions in another way, rather than doing the role reversal, and rather than soliciting explanation of logic or circumstances for the behavior. um, I mean, there's storytelling and other things as well. There's diversion and distraction. That's a little bit manipulative and less honest, to be honest. um, but sometimes, again, depending upon what the circumstances are, it may be just like whatever is here available, because it's tenuous. So that's understandable. A lot of different techniques. And there's one I'm thinking of. I had a minute in mind a second ago. Thinking specifically of. Lightweight involves repeating what the person says or what the person is soliciting, and in repeating it, like saying it out loud and letting the person see how silly that sounds. um, and and then start talking about like laws and saying like, well, do you think that is of the policy to be fair, or not fair, but because that's a little bit complex. But do you think it's a beneficial policy to be honest? Do you think honesty is a beneficial thing for people to do, like in a village? And again, you have to be careful, because people who don't have the experience of dealing with like different types of people, and by that I'm talking about like people who are living like in a comparatively comfortable, secluded kind of environment, and have these philosophies about justice and equality and honesty and everything else like that, have comparatively less experience in interacting and having relationships and knowing the experiences of people who don't have that comfort. And and the actuality of that is that people often have the philosophy of these principles, but when the comfort is challenged, then those principles kind of get a little bit watered down, a little bit muddy, a little bit ignored or otherwise. And oftentimes the principles and the philosophies are predicated upon a larger construct of collectiveness, whether it's a religion, whether it's a nationalism, being part of the nation or society. And there's a presumption that everybody experiences the same comforts that are provided through the pretenses or guise of that collective. And that's not the case. So saying, "Oh, we're all in this together, and don't you think we should all just help each other?" Shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. So again, it's not just a matter of having a philosophy. It's a matter of walking the walk. Um, and so it's beneficial to be mindful of that presumed notion of togetherness and everything else like that, because one, cats who are increasingly hostile and aggressive often are not on that same mindset, and two, even the people who are being accosted and who are holding on to those ideas don't believe in practicing them either. But it's just the propaganda that helps the mechanics of the separation and the comfort. So it's beneficial to be mindful of that and honest about that. So the questions I'm talking about in terms of posing it to the people, like, what do you think is honesty? It's a matter of knowing something significant and substantial about the people that are involved in that conversation, and experiencing the same situation, finding a genuine common ground, and in that common ground, then speaking in that collective first person sense. What do you think we should do in this situation? Da 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 da. And speaking in a way that that person recognizes also that common ground, and so recognizes certain value in the other person, i.e., the first person who's speaking, to say that, okay, now this is a real one or a realer one, and they haven't come at me or disrespected me yet, so I don't have an actual obligation of causing harm. I initiated something because, again, the pious man, pious woman generally don't initiate things, and if there is any act of initiation, generally it's a matter of like contrition, like, oh, yo, my bad, and that's it. So the conflict is generally initiated by the aggressor. So in responding to it, it's not a matter of like being disrespectful and responsible. Like, hold up, let's hold a second. That's legitimate. No disrespect. Let's talk about this. Or you don't say that either, but just have that start to reason. And in that, then the person sees, okay, now again, cats and mice is on different stuff, but there, when we have the patience, the patience don't. It's not like boom, let me have patience. Patience is cultivated practice, just like hitting the weights. My patience, like weight, there's something there. Anyways, it's there. It's there when we have the patience. That's we can say that's facts. Some of these facts we gotta have faith, or these facts involve faith, and in that patience or with that patience, it's again cultivating that honesty within oneself beforehand, so that there's weight within whatever the person is saying. It's not just blah blah blah, because people in that, they feel that, they feel who's being honest, they feel who's being real, who's being fake. And it's just like an animal reading somebody, reading the fear within somebody. It's you there's no words that describe it. You can try to be cold up or whatever, or try to like conjure up thoughts of death or whatever else to intimidate somebody, but when you're trying to relate and empathically with somebody, ain't no fake about that. So, and it's not no immediate load, let me turn it on. We gotta walk it. So and on, to be honest, in that walk, it's involuntary. Like, kinfolk might be having a bad day, but still people already know, like, even if that kinfolk's having a dead day, it's still really a bad day. Still, like, no, they honest, they still got that weight. So that's the nature of it. All things are praised to the Most High. So that's part of having the patience, is the practice daily, cultivating that. And then on the day-to-day basis, again, having energy, doing prayer, meditation, having the mindset, having a good mind, having righteous walk and intentions in the day within all one's actions, having multiple reasons, significant reasons for everything one does, being able to explain that. I mean, initially, and that's part of the conversation. If you're calling somebody else's actions out, call your own actions out, and say, if you're tripping, acknowledge that. So, but again, there's always a path of reasoning. There's always a path of rationalizing something, not to be condemning, not to be accusatory, but just to present the circumstances in a way that the person sees the silly business within a person's own actions and whatever else that is. And particularly, again, like, to be honest, not even looking at this scenario of being robbed or something violent. Let's talk about the things that often happen, which is just like the drive-by insults, drive-by comments, smart comments, disrespectful comments, dehumanizing comments, and then walking away quick. And additionally, or trying to have cold gaslight conversations for 2 or 3 minutes and just unload. And additionally, so those are frustrating circumstances because people have smiling faces and are just talking BS. But even in those circumstances, it's a matter of having patience. What is this person looking for? Why is it? Who's putting this person up to this? What is this person striving for truly? And what does this person want with me? What's the service that I can provide? So when people are threatening, when it's police, when it's agents making threats, making polite threats, making passive aggressive threats, and additionally, call out the authority structures and the constructs. On what authority you're communicating this? Who are you representing? What is the law that you're referencing in terms of what you're communicating? Do you recognize that there's a higher law? Do you believe in God? Do you believe that there's any higher authority than what you have articulated, or that what you're referencing, or what you're speaking on behalf of? Those circumstances that you're describing, do you recognize this as being commensurate with the laws that you're communicating? Do you recognize that there are any other laws that are being violated with what you're communicating? Do you observe the consequences of what you're communicating as well, beyond myself or our collective, but as a practice? And do you see what actors may respond to the circumstances that you're describing or threatening? So again, that's simply a matter of being honest and patient and recognizing there's a certain amount of courage and getting beyond certain fears and certain conditionings of enslavement and subordination and inferiority, and recognizing the divine presence within ourselves just as much as the divine presence within everyone else, and legitimacy. With that divine presence, there's an acknowledgement of a higher law that governs all phenomena all of this earth and beyond this earth. And so all the man-made rules of governments, nations, companies, corporations, people who write sheets of paper and saying this is land that belongs to so-and-so or whatever else, there's higher authorities than all of that, that change all of that. So is being knowledgeable about that. But again, it's not just a matter of having a mind of a cognitive awareness of it. It's a matter of recognizing and practicing those laws, because those same laws that govern the earthly laws and the governments and even the religions, and additionally, those higher laws also pertain to relationship with nature and purpose of life, and additionally. And so it's not just a matter of memorizing laws and then reciting it back and claiming authority. It's a matter of practicing those laws, practicing that peace, practicing that honesty, that sharing, that benevolence, and additionally on a regular basis. And through that practice, there is authority. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be articulate. It doesn't have to be said. It is. It's an energy, and it's an energy of its own. And as an energy of its own, it's a force of its own, without being powerful, without being impositional. So it's a power of its own, but without the imposition of force, without the imposition of power. So that's the nature of it. And again, it's on a day in and day out basis, day in, day out, day in, day out, daily basis. practice patience. We are at an hour. We are at an hour. So there's that. Now, maybe I have some food. uh, when we do the practice, when we have the patience, we find those paths. We find that reasoning. We find the rationale. And it's unnecessary to be argumentative. It's just a matter of presenting, just stating the facts. Not even having an agenda. Genuinely, the agenda is genuinely being genuinely devoted and committed to what is fair. Plain and simple. And presenting that. It's not a matter of having a personal agenda. It's not a matter of looking out personal self. It's letting go of ownership. It's letting go of control. It's letting go of hierarchy and superiority, and just being honest. And when that's violated, it speaks for itself. Beyond the actor, beyond the aggressor, amidst the aggregate, it speaks for itself, and the aggressor becomes increasingly aware and acknowledging of the aggregate. And it's not even just about the aggressor and the actor. So it's continual trod, and it's a continual striving for that humbleness, giving all thanks and praise to the Most High, regarding that is the aggregate. Recognizing our own biases, inevitably, naturally within this life, and in those biases there is imbalance. There's a skewedness, and so we have to continually call ourselves out on that, and we continually have to adjust and be flexible and atone, perform teshuva, redemption, say, oh, yo, that was my bad right there. So eventually, somehow, some way, our ego and our pride starts to creep up again, and it becomes further difficult when our ego and our pride creep up to say that my bad. Oh no, I'm gonna have to let that go right now, because that was bad on my part. So I'm gonna have to just let that go, and everything that I was about to do with that I thought I was about to do with that, I'm gonna have to let that go. So, and when we have that honesty and fairness and balance, then we also, when arriving at the point of saying, oh, no, I gotta hold on to this. No, I'm doing something with this right now. Nah, I got this. So, and I got this. This got me. How about that? And I have a responsibility to maintain that. Nothing belongs to me. I belong to everything. Who invented nothing? Nobody. Indeed. Anyway, that being said, all right, now we're getting into the ramble. Dun 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 dun. Ramble. Is that Ramble or is that Rocky Road? Peace and blessings to all. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.